Welcome to this webinar on governors and their role in supporting staff mental health and well-being. My name is Sinéad Mc Brearty and I'm the Chief Executive of Education Support, a charity that exists to support the mental health and well-being of everyone working in education. We're funded to work across Wales, funded by Welsh Government to work across Wales, delivering support services to schools. And this webinar forms part of a series of resources that we're making available to schools in Wales. I am delighted to welcome two real experts on this subject today to talk to us about governors and well-being. We've got Hannah Stolten, the CEO of Governors for Schools, and Adam Thomas, who's the lead healthy schools practitioner at Caerphilly County Borough Council, as well as being a school governor himself. I'm going to begin by asking both of them to say a little bit about their work, and then we'll dive into some questions and get stuck into the topic of well-being itself. So Hannah, could I ask you to introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Sinead. Yes. As you said, I'm Chief Executive at Governors for Schools. We're a charity that works across England and more recently Wales to find volunteers to sit on governing boards. In the last year, we've been really focused on recruiting wellbeing governors. So we've been running a campaign since September to look specifically at bringing wellbeing governors onto boards and really making sure that wellbeing is at the heart of governing boards and what they do.
And Adam, can I ask you to say a few words?
Yeah, so I'm Adam Thomas. I'm a parent governor for a school in the local area of Blackwood, South Wales, Pentline Primary. I'm also the lead healthy school practitioner in Caerphilly County Borough Council, where we try to support schools in developing a whole school approach to health and well-being. So yeah, at the moment, a real key initiative for us at the moment is supporting staff well-being, especially during the pandemic and the current COVID-19.
Thank you, Adam. And I suppose the first place to get stuck in with is, what are you seeing as the current issues that are coming up for governors in relation to staff, mental health and well-being? Adam, do you want to kick off with what you're seeing?
Yeah, so a key theme that's going through a lot of the schools at the moment is our staff overworked, the pressures that have been put on them from remote learning, especially when the lockdown was in place, was trying to balance the day-to-day running of teaching, being able to give those hours per day, setting work, monitoring work, assessing schools' work, and also at the same time they had to balance their home lives as well, so homeschooling their own children as well. So they had a lot of pressure on. They were working a lot of hours per day. Teachers already were working overtime before the COVID-19, but I think at the moment with the pandemic put in place and the further work put on them, it was a lot more hours they were putting in and a lot more stress that they were trying to overcome these barriers put in. And also, I think a bit of a key issue as well that they had to overcome was the IT and digital platforms they had to adapt to very quickly. Some teachers were fine with it and excelled within this area, but there's a lot of teachers who don't really use as much IT or digital platforms as required during the lockdown, so they had to become really skilled and trained really quickly within this area to ensure they could supply and offer pupils an opportunity of learning.
Absolutely. Hannah, you're obviously in contact with a lot of governors around the country. Are there any of those issues that Adam's raised that are particularly relevant, or are there others that you've noticed as well coming up?
I think definitely there is, I mean, governors generally are very aware of teacher workloads and that impact and the impact that is having, especially during these times. I think a lot of governors are really just wondering what they can do to support. I mean, governors got into the role because they wanted to support schools. So it's really thinking about how they can support the staff. And I think that is some of the key issue that they're facing really is actually what can I do to help on the ground, you know, that the teachers are and staff, not just teachers, but the whole staff within a school are really under immense pressure, and how can they help and support really. So that's a lot of the questions that we're getting. What can we do? What can we put in place now? Not just for now though, but for the future as well, that makes sure that wellbeing is really catered for and make sure it's on the agenda.
And that point about it being not just now, is of course really critical, isn't it? Because we're coming through and we're still in really the acute phase of pandemic, but the legacy issues will be with us for some time. And I suppose in that sense, we're all desperate for a bit of good news. And Hannah, I'm just wondering if you're seeing positive examples of particular things that governors are doing or doing well in response.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, I think during the height of the pandemic, there was lots of governors taking in cupcakes and hand cream and sending notes of thanks and support to school staff. But moving forward, I think governors are now very keen to have wellbeing on the agenda. So when they have those meetings with schools, the first question is very much, how are the staff doing? How is this impacting on them? So just having it there as a question, I think, is a really good start that we're seeing, and governors saying that this is making all the difference, that it's actually opening up the conversation, and thinking about surveying staff, finding out what works for them is really key. And I think a lot of governors have thought very carefully about how they can support in this area, and that's something that they're definitely doing now, which is great.
Adam, obviously you're a school governor yourself. How has your school responded to the issues that staff are facing, the wellbeing issues that staff are facing?
Yeah, so the school has been very proactive supporting the staff wellbeing. They're constantly sharing supportive services with the teachers and all the staff in the school. Who can they go for additional support with stress or wellbeing issues? Any financial issues as well. They've been linking in with external services like the education support. Within our council as well, we work along with Care First Plan, who will obviously provide lots of alternatives how to support health and wellbeing during the lockdown, and what their service can support each member of staff with any personal issues. There's always like an extra voice they can reach out to for additional information. Alternatively, within the school, the head teacher's been really proactive and has been really good at sharing key information throughout the pandemic, keeping all the teachers up to date with constant new regulations and guidance submitted by Welsh Government, ensuring that the school is a safe place for all their staff to attend, ensuring all staff safety is important throughout it all. And also linking back to the first issue with like the digital issues, the school has ensured that each staff has digital platforms to be able to teach it from home and obviously provide homeschooling. And also additionally to that, they've had training opportunities for staff to upskill and develop their teaching techniques whilst homeschooling as well. So been really positive on the signs within the school supporting staff wellbeing.
Very comprehensive response there. One of the things, and I don't know how each of you will respond to this because you're coming at it from different perspectives, but a question we get asked a lot is specifically, what is the governance role around supporting staff? So people, and we see this with other issues, don't we? I mean, I'm a school governor, so there is a constant battle for school governors to stay in a governing space and not to cross over that line into what is the role of the school leadership. And I think with wellbeing, and particularly wellbeing in a pandemic, that's been a question for people. Like, what is the role for governors and how is that distinct from the role of the school leadership? Hannah, what would you say to that?
Absolutely, it is a strategic, governance role is a strategic one, not an operational one. There shouldn't be, going in and trying to get involved hands-on style. I think hopefully a school would have a wellbeing lead, and it might be that the governance speaks to that wellbeing lead, or obviously as a governing board you'd speak to the senior leadership team to find out how it's going. I think having it on the school development plan, if wellbeing is on your school development plan, then that will really sort of enable that conversation around the board table. I think just making sure that the senior leadership team is aware that it's a priority for the governing board, as well as the senior leadership team will basically enable them to hopefully move forward with it and feel that it is a priority. So it's really to give that support, I think. another area where I guess governors really should be involved is in policies. So when they're reviewing policies, that is part of the governance role, and thinking about wellbeing and how it is a thread through all policies, not just, you know, the ones that are specifically around that area, but really trying to make sure, you know, if you're looking at the marking policy, actually, how does this affect workload and therefore impact on staff wellbeing? So it's really, I think, that level that you should be doing, not hands-on, not getting involved in the day-to-day.
Adam, what's your take on that, on the specific role of governors here on the question of staff wellbeing?
Yeah, so I totally agree with Hannah there, but additionally at meetings, maybe just raise the topic, governors to check in with the head teacher as well. Try and encourage the questions like, what is the overall mental health and well-being within the school currently? Is there any concerns with any staff within the school? What has the school done in the past or currently doing to support staff well-being? And then obviously, how is the head teacher's health and well-being? This is where, like, obviously a good chair could have a good relationship with their head teacher and be able to have those one-to-one discussions. Like, a lot of head teachers, I wouldn't want at the governors meeting to share their overall concerns in front of everyone, but if you have a decent relationship between your chair and your head teacher, they might be able to have those important conversations in a bit further detail, and obviously the governors then can link in together and try and provide support for everyone within in the school. And then additionally, I think governors is good for them to network as well with other governors across the authorities within the governing bodies as well. Try and see whatever good practice may be going in some schools and see if it can be imaged, copied within your school, and try and support the staff as well as you can.
This point about chairs and school leaders is absolutely critical, isn't it? I mean, we see a lot of concern about the well-being of school leaders, and actually in Wales it's less critical. We see in other parts of the UK even more pressure on head teachers, but in Wales it's a little bit less. It's a degree less concerning, which is good news in Wales. But those relationships between the chair and the school leader are really critical, because the school leader is so often, and particularly when we get out of the cities, particularly when we're in smaller communities, the school leader has such a standing in the community, such a visible role. And often we hear from school leaders their own sense that they have to carry the community with them, and they have to be strong and be seen to be strong. Hannah, I don't know if you get feedback from chairs of governors about how they do handle those relationships.
Yeah, we've seen two aspects really, I suppose. Firstly, where the chair and the head teacher had a really good relationship before all this struck, it's really sort of enabled them to grow that relationship further. And I think we speak to lots of chairs. You know, I'm a chair of government myself. I know, with having hour-long conversations with head teachers every week, you know, just to check in and make sure, as well as all of the day-to-day, you know, checking that they're okay, you know, their own well-being is okay, because it has been an extremely stressful time. So absolutely, I think that relationship is really key across all schools, and I think it's the foundation really for how things move forward with the whole governing board. Additional to that, I would just say, I think it's been quite a lot of pressure on chairs of governors, particularly over the last year. I think we've heard from quite a lot of chairs of governors who have sort of talked about their own well-being, and actually it's a voluntary role they've taken on. You know, they want to do something good, but it has been very stressful for them as well. So I think that's something just to also be aware of, that governors need to model good well-being for themselves as much as the staff. So I think that's a key point.
There's a real limit to what we can all do, isn't there? And there's no limit to demand in this situation. So that personal boundary setting becomes really, really important. Have either of you seen much in the way of chairs of governors or governing boards who feel like they must hold the leader to account, they must hold the school leader to account, and so feel unable to consider well-being because they see that as somehow taking the scrutiny away or not doing their governance role? Have you had any experience of that?
I'd say less so over the last year. I think maybe governors are beginning now to question, actually, has our role changed, shifted? Do I need to get back to more holding to account? And probably asking questions of how they can keep doing that with with maintaining the support that schools will inevitably need going forward. So I think it sort of was put on the shelf for a little while because basically there were other priorities and it was really just that getting through. But I think there are ways and means of holding schools to account, and actually you want to work together in a partnership, and through working that partnership you can hold a school to account, because if you're all driving for the same goals, then you're inevitably going to be making sure that you're holding each other to account to get there.
Holding to account and looking out for the well-being of staff, these are not mutually exclusive, are they? And I think maybe in the past they've been framed as so, but they can both be done. Yeah. I'm wondering whether either of you have seen or heard stories of things, and again, I say this as a governor, and it's useful sometimes to look at things that we do that maybe aren't us at our best. I'm wondering if there's anything you've seen or heard about and you think, no, this is something we ought not be doing as governors. This isn't helpful. I understand where it's coming from, but it's not helpful. Adam, I don't know if you've seen anything.
Yeah. So, like obviously we've got to be understanding that a lot of things have changed in the last year. So, like obviously you mentioned the school development plans, we still want to look at and work off them, but we've got to be totally realistic to say, well, some of these things in the school development plan are just not achievable this year. We've got to try and take a step back and just say, well, what can we achieve maybe further down the line? What's the short aims of this year going to be in the next summer term as well? So still work with our school development plans, but don't go through each one and really scrutinise the school to ensure they're achieving each area that they set out at the beginning of the year, because so much has changed this year, which is going to affect the overall targets at the end of the year. And also another one, which is possibly regards to virtual meetings and how governors engage within these meetings within schools. I think is very negative if a governor like myself was to engage in a meeting and not have my screen on and not engage or interact or communicate with the head teacher. It's probably very disheartening for a head teacher just to be speaking to a blank screen. It is very difficult via meetings virtually, but if we can have our screens on, engage with the schools as much as possible and just provide a bit of comments or challenges where necessary.
That's a really important point you make there, Adam. I think, and I've sat in enough meetings where others have had their screens off and you're not quite sure the extent to which they're genuinely participating, are you? So I think it's a really important point, well made there.
Yeah, just acknowledging that you obviously participate within the meeting. Like it's not very nice when you're just staring at a blank screen. So if you have your screen on, just showing your smile and obviously adding in where needed, just showing your support to the school, I think is very beneficial for them.
I like that one of the bits of advice we've got on here, documented in posterity, is around smiling. I think it's great that we get that out there. Hannah, is there anything else that you've seen that's important to note here?
I think absolutely, Adam, what you said, I completely agree. And I think it is about making sure that you're thinking about where the school is at right now, rather than looking back or, holding to account against targets that were set before all this happened. That can't be done. I think also we've seen occasions where people have sort of had knee-jerk reactions, or got to do something about this wellbeing. It is really important. Oh, you've got to implement all of this stuff, and it actually just adds to the the staff workload, and that's not the idea. Rather than making incremental steps towards something, it's, well, we've got to roll it all out now, and yes, I know you've got 500 other things to deal with, but we want this done now. So I think it's just, okay, it is important, but let's take one day at a time and think about what actually works right now for us and what's going to make a difference for us now.
It's very tempting as a governor to go and find, scan around, and then you find 4 checklists and 6 policies and 3 activities and a strategy document that you'd like populated by the end of next week, because then you will have done wellbeing. And of course, it is entirely counterproductive. And certainly in our work, we talk about sticking to the substance of wellbeing and doing the things that genuinely make a difference to enhance the work experience of staff. And sometimes that means that maybe when it's less of an issue, I think, in Wales in terms of regulatory pressure. I think there is a genuine engagement in wellbeing because it's a core pillar of the curriculum going forward. And I think that's really, really important, that it is an authentic engagement in the topic of well-being and not one that is tick box driven. Hannah, you mentioned the well-being governors and that work that you are doing. Can you tell us a bit more about it and about the purpose of the role?
Our aim is that schools will really focus on wellbeing, and what we're encouraging schools to do is to have a wellbeing governor. It may not be that you have just one wellbeing governor, it might be that it's shared. I mean, I know in the school that I'm a governor at, we have a wellbeing governor for pupils and one for staff as well. So we sort of shared that role. It might be a committee, but really it's about making sure that wellbeing is being discussed at every meeting, that it is on the agenda and that it's kept on the agenda, as I said, moving forward. I think that's really key. It might be that they are looking at surveys. As you said, I think a lot of schools are surveying what's going on and auditing what is actually in place and making sure that it is right for the staff at the school, rather than a generic solution that maybe doesn't fit with what works for them. I think we've heard about schools sort of implementing, oh, you have to leave by 4 o'clock on a Friday or something like that, but actually that can cause more stress for some staff because they want to finish everything before they go home. And you know, it's thinking about and hearing and really listening to what staff want, and trying to make sure that is part of the governing board meetings, and make sure those areas are sort of discussed.
Brilliant. The end of this conversation now, of course, is when I turn to both of you for your wisdom. I guess the question is, if you could land one particular point with governors as they're engaging with and considering staff well-being, what would the thing be that you'd like them to take on board? Adam, do you want to add your thought?
Yeah, just raise the profile of staff well-being. We know how important it is for the staff and their relationships with pupils. Any staff within a school who has poor staff well-being, then the relationship with the children is just not going to be as the requirement that it needs. You can have that poor link with them, and the teaching is probably going to be affected as well. So as a governor, raise the profile of staff well-being, support the school with any initiatives or interventions they'd like to put into place, support staff. Don't criticize it either as well. Try and help the school move forward, and just look to others and see where you can model good practice within your school, which you've seen elsewhere.
Brilliant. That's a nice little compendium of advice in there. Hannah, how about you?
Yes, I would completely agree. I think understanding the importance of staff wellbeing is really key as a sort of foundation, is understanding the knock-on effects that good staff wellbeing has on things like retention, on pupil achievement, you know, and general performance. So I think that's really key from a governance perspective. And then just to ask the questions and then really listen to the answers, to make sure that you're getting it right for your setting, so that you're finding the right solutions for your own school, rather than the school down the road or just a generic sort of answer.
And of course, the reason we do all of this is we want our children and young people to be in the best environment that they can. And positive well-being is going to lead to the best teaching and learning that we can create in all of our schools. So really nice to land that point. I want to remind all governors watching this, and indeed anyone from the school community watching this, Education Support has a team on the ground in Wales, delighted to work with you and support you as you develop your well-being strategy and activity in your own school or community. I also want to remind you of our helpline, which is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's free, confidential, and staffed by qualified counsellors. And it's there for anyone working in education who wants to have a conversation about something that's troubling them, or even the fact that they're not, you know, they're just not feeling fantastic and they don't know why. I think sometimes to have an independent source for conversation can be very helpful. And that's 08000 562 561. And alongside this video, there'll be links to additional resources for you to consider. So I want to thank Adam Thomas and Hannah Stolten very much indeed for taking the time to come and talk to us about this today. And we will leave you to consider the well-being of staff in your school and hope that there's some of this advice you can implement immediately. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.